Hello again, everybody. As you can tell, it's quite late at night again. I'm sitting here at 3:20, and again another night. Well, today I didn't get up until after 5 p.m. again, and I needed to go out and get something to eat. So, thought I'd make another video, and a topic presented itself. I'm sure at least some of you would have heard about the stuff that's going on in Paris as I speak. And I thought that would definitely make a good topic for a video. Well, when it comes to my personal thoughts on the matter is, obviously it's a terrible thing, and I hope that, all those that are injured and still alive make as swift and as pain-free recoveries as possible. We in Britain had a similar thing happen on the 7th of July a few years ago. While it wasn't, quite as bad, it was just a few bombs that had gone off. The people weren't running around the city with AK-47s shooting people up. So over here we do understand, somewhat what it feels like to be attacked in this way, and definitely it's not something I would wish on somebody. For a while now, I've been concerned that something like this might happen, because at the moment in Europe we have what's called migrant crisis. We've got lots of people coming over in boats from North Africa and the Middle East, fleeing war, and in some cases, quite a few of the cases, it's economic migration. Rather than being purely, them being refugees and trying to get away from an oppressive regime. Because, to be honest, if you were scared for your life and trying to find somewhere safe, you would stop at the closest safe country. You wouldn't keep going and going and going for, thousands of miles until you found one that was rich enough. But we won't go into that because that's another kettle of fish entirely. What's been said by the security services for the last several months is that there's indications that Islamic State operatives, Al-Qaeda operatives, etc., have been infiltrating the migrant groups, joining them on their trek to Europe, and then meeting up with other friendly elements that are already in Europe to carry out terrorist attacks, or at least plan them. And it's just happened. So I think that as a result of this, we're going to see a much more swift dealing with the migrant crisis. I hope it doesn't result in oppression of the migrant groups and imprisonment and so on and so forth, because almost all of them would have had nothing to do with this and wouldn't have anything to do with it if someone asked them to. So they're not to blame. They're just these fundamentalists are effectively hitching a ride on their coattails, for want of a better phrase. God, it's cold out here. My car says it's 6.5 degrees outside, but I'm shivering. Something that I do think is important to note, though, because there are a lot of people out there. I mean, I would admit even myself to sometimes being a little bit generalising when I talk about this, but to quote Toby Ziegler from The West Wing in the special episode that was thrown together just after the September 11th terrorist attack in New York. They had a bunch of school students come in, and they were, getting a tour of the White House, and people were talking to them about it because they were gifted and talented youngsters. They had the White House went into a lockdown because someone had tried to shoot up the White House, I think. And they were all just sitting down in the canteen, talking about stuff, telling stories about their careers and stuff, and the topic turned to the terrorist attack that had happened very recently, as far as they were concerned. And they had a whiteboard up there, and Toby, wrote up on the board. I'm paraphrasing here because the wording they used wasn't great, but Islamic extremist is to a Muslim what blank is to a Christian. And, they went through things, Christian fundamentalists, something that would, I think, like Westboro Baptist Church, but I don't think they used it by name. It was obviously something that made me think of the Westboro Baptist Church. And he said, no, you're all wrong. And he wrote down Ku Klux Klan. And that is something that I think a lot of people on this side tend to forget. The way that Christians in America abhor what the Ku Klux Klan does in the name of the religion, a vast majority of Muslims in the world abhor what these extremists do in the name of Islam. And it's a very, very, very sensitive subject, and not one that should be taken lightly. Most of the Muslims I've met have been very nice people. They've been very tolerant, and when incidents have happened and they've got Muslims on the news and what have you to talk about things, and they're always the first to say that, this is wrong, this isn't what Islam is about, these people do not represent us, and I feel ashamed that they are doing this in the name of my religion. And like I said, that's something that I feel a lot of people, including myself sometimes, I must admit, don't always consider. I mean, I was just listening to the radio here, and they had this Muslim guy on whose family was from Pakistan, and he'd been living in the UK for a long time. That after the 7/7 bombings, he was actually in London at the time, and all the news was coming in. He was just completely shocked and didn't know how to respond to it. And there was, he said that a nun had approached him after things was going on. She sat with him and she talked to him and said, "I know how you're feeling now, because as a Catholic, in the past, when the IRA did things like this in Britain, I felt ashamed and I felt scared that that people would do this in the name of my faith. So I do genuinely appreciate what you're going through here, and I want you to know that that it's okay to feel like that, though you shouldn't be ashamed, because it's nothing to do with you, and it's nothing to do with your religion, it's just them." So, yeah, I hope that the anti-Muslim and whatnot rhetoric isn't stepped up to an intolerable degree as a result of this, because, like I said, almost all of them have absolutely nothing to do with any of this, and it's not fair to generalise. Personally, me, talking as an anti-theist, I think that, we should, just dismantle religion, organised religion, because in many cases it's, caused more problems than it's solved. So, yeah. But again, I'm not going to go into that because it's, it's a can of worms, and it's a very, very sensitive subject, and you can easily offend someone without meaning to. There's something that I do think that it's important to talk about in times like this, when you've got groups like Islamic State, Al-Qaeda running around blowing themselves up and shooting innocent civilians, is when you get down to it, it's our fault to a degree that this is happening. It's a part of it is a lingering legacy of colonialism, and also it's modern Western, particularly American, approaches to dealing with problems in the Middle East. The Taliban was created by this, people hate the Taliban, and they say that, the Taliban shouldn't exist, and, they should be exterminated, etc. But what they don't realise is the Taliban was created effectively by the CIA in the 1980s so that they could fight a proxy war against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. They armed them, they supplied them, they provided funding for them, and they created an organisation out of the Mujahideen that eventually became the Taliban, and that overthrew the legitimate government of Afghanistan. And many of you will know what happened since then. And then there's both of the Gulf Wars and so on and so forth. It stokes up anti-Western sentiment, everything that we do. I mean, it's like, from our point of view, we're trying to help them, but in a lot of cases, they don't want our help. Even though we look at their situation and consider it abhorrent, the way that these fanatical Muslim administrations treat women, minorities, homosexuals, transgender people, etc. And we think, this is breaching their human rights. We need to, go in and make them treat these people with respect. But the problem is, they don't want us to. A lot of them, because of the way that they've been educated and brought up, they, the stuff that they do that we abhor, they're quite happy to carry on doing, and they resent any implication that that we are better than them because of how tolerant and inclusive and, nice we are to, different groups of people. I mean, a lot of I'm shocked at some of the things I read coming out of the Middle East. Like, an entire Christian village was burnt to the ground in Pakistan because a Pakistani Christian girl with Down syndrome tore some pages out of a Quran, and the local, the Muslim population of the area got whipped up into a furor by, the local religious leaders and various zealots in the community, and they just went around pulling Christians from their homes, setting fire to their property, beating them, beheading them. And I'm sitting there reading thinking, Jesus Christ, how can they do this? It's the 21st century. They're acting like it's the Middle Ages. And, it's hard to believe that that's not an accurate reflection of, the Middle East, Pakistan, Islam, when it happens so frequently and with almost, when you look at what it's like, almost as if the government doesn't care that these things happen. The Pakistani minister for Christians, religious minorities, he was campaigning for blasphemy laws to be repealed because they unfairly targeted Christians and religious minorities, doing what the majority of people would consider quite innocent things, and yet they would be arrested under the blasphemy laws and given lashes or executed or just put in prison for life for doing something frankly ridiculous and not harmful in any way to Islam. And as a result of him campaigning for the blasphemy laws to be repealed, a Pakistani lawyer who, this is a man who practices law and, who works in court, defending people, prosecuting people. He murdered him. This is a guy who has, he's a trained legal professional, and he just goes out and murders a government minister because he doesn't agree with his policy on blasphemy laws. It's ridiculous. And when things like that happen, it's very hard to, like I said, it's very hard to accept and understand that that is not the norm and not accepted. And it isn't the norm and it isn't accepted, but it happens so much that one can be forgiven for believing that it is. And it's incidents like these that lead to Western intervention, and all that does is stoke more anti-Western sentiment and causes, yet more men and some women to turn to these terrorist organisations in the name of the jihad. And it's times like these that I just sit and think, my God, religion makes the world a terrible place sometimes. Because if I'm sure that there would be a whole host of other problems, as well. It's not like that, removing Islam or removing all religions would, automatically solve all of the world's problems, but there would be a substantial amount of problems that would be solved by these things no longer existing. And, yeah, it just... I don't remember who it was that said this, but it was, for bad people will always do bad things, but for good people to do bad things, that takes religion. Somehow their religion convincing them that what they are doing is just, or what someone else is doing is wrong, and that they need to be punished for it. As is the case with many American Christians hating homosexuals and transgender people, and the same to a much greater extent in Muslim countries. It's a very intricate, very complex subject that it's not something that one can generalize about or make grand sweeping statements and have them be truthful. or factual, I should say. And it just kind of, it's the negative impact on the world caused by religion is something that needs to be discussed and debated and talked about on an international level. But because it's such a sensitive topic to people, that it's not a subject that I think can be broached just yet. There's far too many people that cling to these antiquated ideals and believe in these these holy books that were written hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, that should have no bearing on the way that we lead our lives today. That they put so much stock in them, and it's like, as modern, enlightened, educated people, it's something that we need to have an open and frank discussion about in order to bring about the change that is so desperately needed in some parts of the world. However, like I say, because it's such a sensitive topic, I don't think we're ready for it yet. It will just cause so much offence and affront that if the UN starts talking about, for want of a better term, anti-religious, undertakings or movements or projects, it will just make itself a target for religious extremists the world over. And even some moderates might sympathise with the extremists because they might feel personally attacked if now we started trying to eradicate religion, even if it was just the incredibly negative aspects about it. That might be enough to turn the moderates to the extremists' cause. So I don't think it's something that will be able to be dealt with this century. Certainly not in my lifetime, anyway. Which is unfortunate because that means that it's just going to carry on and on and on, and in some cases it's going to get much worse before we're able to make it better. I was watching a documentary last week, the decline of the British Empire. The episode was about the handover of power in India, and they were debating. The viceroy was debating with Gandhi and the leaders of the group that wanted India to be independent and be a free state, and unfortunately they couldn't agree because the Hindus, the Christians, etc. Were abhorred by the Muslims in the group, and they split off into two factions, and they couldn't agree on anything. Now, the group led by Gandhi, the Indian National Congress, they wanted a united India. All of the territory that was under British control, the British Raj, the princely states, the former East India Company lands, etc. They wanted all of it to become a contiguous Indian state, but the Muslim group refused to share a country with the Hindus, and the talks broke down, and the viceroy, because he was ineffective at bringing about a conclusion, he was replaced with Lord Mountbatten, and he basically sat them down and forced them to come to an agreement, and the agreement became, in the words of the leader of the Islamist group, what we want is two countries, Hindustan and Pakistan. So that's what happened. India was partitioned into Pakistan and India, and the day after the transfer of power started the systematic slaughter of over 1 million Hindus as they fled what had become Pakistan. It's like everything had been bottled up by British control of India, and then once Britain left, the cork came off the bottle and everything just erupted. And there was riots, there were entire cities almost completely destroyed by fire. Hundreds of thousands of Muslims and Hindus fighting each other in the streets, and the Hindu refugees who used to live in the Punjab, which the Punjab was part of an area that was partially in India and partially in Pakistan. They were trying to flee Pakistan to get into the Hindu territory of India, and they were just being slaughtered by Muslim gangs. And there was one particular thing that quite disturbed me, was that there was this large group of Hindus who had to camp out because it was after nightfall, and they were all tired. They camped out. This is thousands of people in one group all camped out, and they heard the Muslims approaching. They'd been killing people for days, and they decided that they would have the Hindu men decided that they would have to kill their women and girls, because them being killed at the hands of their husbands and fathers was a better fate than being raped and butchered at the hands of the Muslims. And I'm sitting here watching this and thinking, Jesus Christ, maybe colonialism wasn't such a bad thing if it took such a short time for such atrocities to take place after the handover of power. Maybe Britain should have stayed in control of India for just a little bit longer. So that a more equitable agreement could have been hammered out, and the safety of the Hindus assured as they left Pakistan, if after more extensive talks that India had indeed been partitioned. And things that are going on in the Middle East right now are the things that were going on in the Middle East in the 1800s before Britain colonised the area. So, you have the whole things with the Sunnis and the Shiites, with them, hating each other and and having these, the best way that I can describe it is sect wars, because they are different sects of the same religion, like Catholics and Protestants are different sects of Christianity, and they were killing each other as well at one point. So you have the Sunnis and the Shiites killing each other in the 1800s, then Britain moves in, puts a stop to it, and then Britain leaves and it starts up again. I do definitely hope that we don't see more of what's going on in Paris right now in the future, in other European countries, but I fear that we will, and that we won't see the end of this for many years at least. There needs to be some sort of resolution in the Middle East with regards to Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and various other Muslim extremist groups in North Africa and so on, because as far as they're concerned, we're the enemy, and they will fight until the last man to destroy us. And if they can't destroy us, they will at least wound us as much as they can. And until we deal with the underlying problems in the Middle East and North Africa, then this problem is not going to go away. And I don't think that the way that we have been approaching these problems in the past is going to provide the solution that is required. We don't need America going and steamrolling over the lot of them, because it's just going to kick up more anti-Western sentiment and more of our innocent citizens are going to be murdered as a result of it. It's a very complex issue, and like I said, it's something that needs to be talked about and openly debated, frank debate. We shouldn't have to mince words just so that we don't offend people. There's too much pandering to certain groups. It's almost like if you state a fact, they get angry with you, and one should not ever be in fear of stating the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it makes anybody, or angry that it makes anybody. Whether or not they've got reason to be angry, if it's the truth, then it should be protected and allowed to be said. And that, I think, is where a lot of the problem lies, on both sides. In the West, we're almost unwilling to admit that we've caused this problem, and that the ways that we've tried to resolve it in the past have failed because they were flawed. And on the other side, they need to accept that the religion that they're basing their country's moral system, and in a lot of cases legal system, on is out of touch with the modern world, archaic, and frankly dangerous. Nobody should be killed for saying what they believe in or doing what they believe is... Well, I'm trying to think of an analogy that can be used in the case of homosexual and transgendered people. But yeah, nobody should be killed just because they like penises and don't like women, or they have. I'm loath to use the term birth defect, but effectively, when it comes to transgenderism, it is a birth defect in that the brain developed differently to the rest of the body, and the brain got, for want of a better term, female hormones during development, and the rest of the body got male hormones, or vice versa. So yeah, nobody should be killed for circumstances about themselves that they cannot control. Yet these things happen day in and day out in the Muslim world, and they need to stop. But like I said, the way that we've been going about trying to stop them up until now obviously is not the correct way to deal with it. Something needs to be done in a way that doesn't lead to more anti-Western sentiment, and at least attempts dialogue with these people, and a frank and trusting, respectful dialogue. Excuse me. Because I'm sick and tired of seeing stories about men being beheaded because they're gay, and women being stoned because they went out of their house without male escort, or these religious scholars saying ridiculously outrageous shit such as adultery causes earthquakes, and women who go out without male escort and do not wear a burqa will tempt our men into adultery, and women should not be allowed to drive because it will cause them to have rolled up hips, which will lead to birth defects. Really? Are you honestly gonna let... Are we honestly going to allow these people to go on saying things like that and at least not even trying to educate their people? I mean, for the one about women who drive, obviously they just need to look at women in the West and see that they've been driving for over a century and there have been no birth defects of their children as a direct result of their driving. I mean, for God's sake, you could say that, you know, if that was true, that a woman sitting in a chair would develop rolled up hips, and that women should only ever stand or lie down and not sit, because frankly that's just as ridiculous as telling them that they can't drive. I'm waxing lyrical, I believe is the proper term for what I'm doing. I get so impassioned by such things that I can just go on and on and on and on about it, and I'm apologising that if any of my opinions offend anybody who's watching these videos, but I will continue to voice my opinions until I feel that there is no need for them to be voiced, and I will not have a need for them to be voiced when there is proper change and the things that I am so offended by no longer happen. Put simply. But anyway, I've been recording for almost 40 minutes now, and it's just before 4 a.m, so I think I should be heading off home now. So, ending on a slightly more positive note. I wish the people of Paris and France my best. I know that France and Britain haven't tended to see eye to eye over the centuries, but, I think we can have a bit of solidarity in situations like these. I hope it doesn't go on for much longer, and that all the people that have been injured recover quickly. Be seeing you.